All right, I'll call the meeting to order. This is a scheduled meeting of the Historic Resources Commission of the City of Albany. We certainly welcome anyone viewing us on YouTube if we're connected.
Yeah.
Okay, and if anyone has signed up to make a comment, or if anyone here wants to make a comment, we just ask that the comment be kept to the matter at hand and be limited to 3 minutes in duration. We have, let's see, roll call. Commissioner Myers, the chair of the commission, is present. Commissioner McEnany, Commissioner Garrity, Commissioner Kaplan, and Commissioner Tobin are present, and I declare we have a quorum. And Aaron Glennon is here, the Deputy Planning Director, representing the commission this evening. We have 3 items on the agenda this evening. 2 of them are public hearing items related to seeker declarations, and we will vote on those. The 3rd item is a public workshop item related to the concept review for the scattered sites in the Grossville South End Historic District. With that said, we'll proceed with our agenda. The first item is that 62 property application in the South End Grossville Historic District, and we have been requested to declare the planning board to act as the lead agency for seeker, and for the coordinated environmental review to construct the 62 single, 2, 3, and multi-unit dwelling structures totaling 166 dwelling units. So, and we will be doing concept review on that same property in the workshop portion of the meeting. So I would entertain a motion to agree to the designation of the planning board as the lead agency for seeker.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and seconded. I assume there's no discussion on the matter,
No
so
discussion.
I will just ask for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that one is carried. The
Can I
second,
ask a question?
Yes.
Who's MDG Development?
Can I speak?
Go, Jim, go ahead.
They are a development group based out of the New York City area. I don't know if anyone from MDG Asher, if you're online, you can speak a little bit more. But we are working with them on this development. They've done developments in Troy, New York as well, so nearby, and we've been working with them on this project here in Albany. So they're out of the New York City area.
Thank you.
okay.
Are they,
Get your name in the record for,
Oh, Eduardo Navarro.
thank you.
is it MDG Development or MDG Design and Construction?
I can speak to that, everyone. Hi, I'm Alex Takitis. I'm Vice President of Development Construction for MDG Development. We are known as MDG Design and Construction. Our development side is known as MDG Development. We're an affordable housing developer based out of Long Island, New York. We do affordable housing preservation and construction in the entire New York area, concentrating in the 5 boroughs, Long Island, and now up in the upstate region, Troy, soon to be Cohoes, and Albany, hopefully. We also work along the East Coast in Florida, the Virgin Islands, Delaware, and in Pennsylvania as well.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
The second item is, again, a designation for lead agency for the Albany Planning Board for the project in the Mansion District at 70, 108 through 114 Grand Streets by the Community Builders. And again, this is the construction two-story building with a community center and general office space at 70 Grand Street, as well as the construction of 4 three-story townhouses at 108, 110, 112, and 114 Grand Street. So I will entertain a motion to declare the planning office lead agency,
Planning board.
planning board, excuse me.
So moved.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. No discussion, assumably. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. That motion is also carried.
Yep.
So we voted on everything we need to vote on this evening.
Yes.
The next item is a discussion of the Albany County Land Bank and the project that MDG Development is pursuing in the South End, Groesbeckville district. This project came to us over a year ago, I believe, as 40 sites, scattered sites for development. And then that was for concept review. Then we saw that same 40 site project again for more development of the concept. Again, at a workshop, but also at that time they were doing their archaeological investigation and provided a report, a 1A report, and then recommendations for the examination sites. At that time, or shortly thereafter, it was determined that they would expand the scope of their project and add more parcels. So they are coming back this evening with the concept that has been developed for 62 scattered sites, mixed-use structures on vacant lots scattered throughout the South End Groesbeckville Historic District. And I believe there is also an archaeological report associated with this, or for discussion this evening as well.
Yeah.
At least the 1A portion of the report.
There was I sent the meeting packet with all of the design documents, and then the second packet that was also in the Dropbox was all of the archaeological documentation. So the original phase 1A, the revised phase 1A, the phase 1B report, and the letter of no effect from the State Historic Preservation Office. I can't remember, there was some other document in there, but all of the archaeological and those findings were all packaged together as a secondary document for today.
Before we begin, can you help in that where did we leave off with these smaller, the fewer
With the
units?
40, so the meeting that Eduardo from Pissarro, who's here this evening out of Rochester, and the discussion with MDG at the last meeting, which was October of 2023, was based on the recommendation, based on what you all had reviewed on the 40 sites, and then off of the recommendations from phase 1A for the potential 1B site investigations, we had been discussing scheduling a site visit for the commission to be able to go out and kind of walk some of the large vacant spans, and I think also get more kind of contextual photos of the neighborhood and the areas where the development was going to be taking place. And I think we had paused that based on discussions with the project management team, because there was at that point the possibility of expanding to additional sites. So we kind of were waiting on that because we weren't sure necessarily where all those sites were going to be located.
So the archaeology is for the 40 or for the 62?
It is for the 62.
Okay,
So everything had been revised and it's now for the 62 sites.
okay,
And in the package of the 62 sites, they have the elevation views that we saw in earlier packages really focused on the redevelopment. Now they're focusing on providing imagery of the neighboring buildings and imagery also of the buildings across the street. Anything that's kind of extant in the neighborhood adjacent to these new buildings is shown in the package.
so I, just to finish that line of questioning, does it seem to you that we were really just in design discussion and height and dimensions and materials, et cetera, in preliminary discussions for the 40? And now that, if not set, that was a set of conversations and we'll be starting on that conversation and anew for the additional 20? Or did we not get that far?
So for both of the meetings previously in fall of 2023, those discussions were really only at the concept level.
Okay.
I think the initial meeting, that was like a concept meeting, was a very kind of broad brush, like overview of the project. There was a little bit more kind of pointed discussion in the second meeting. But because now that there's been 20 additional sites added to the project, we've kind of had to start this all over again because of the kind of the substantial addition of like the number of sites that this has caused. They've had to restart their seeker process, go back and revise and restart kind of the archaeological process. So we have more or less kind of, think of this as kind of a brand new
Okay, thank you.
review of the project, of starting it over again.
And because it's just a workshop tonight, that gives me and maybe other people that wanna review the phase 1 report,
Yes.
cause I need just a little time
Yeah.
to go through it, so it's, that will be great, since we don't have to do a vote tonight on that.
I mean, based on what I've gone through and a lot, I think Eduardo and the design team have taken comments that you have provided previously and integrated them into
Yeah.
the design work that is being currently presented. And I would say that a lot of there hasn't been a substantial amount of change to a lot of like the proposal of the previous 40 buildings. It's kind of building off of what had previously been
Right, okay. Good.
proposed, but it is still kind of we're looking at this as more or less a new application.
And I think more drawing information is provided.
Yes.
Because we asked for sections and
Mhm. Yeah.
more detail associated with the construction of the buildings.
Yeah, and some of the discussions that like planning staff have been having with their project management team offline, and some of like the sightline drawings that have been made available, so our discussions that I've had with Eduardo about like rooftop installations and things like that, so there is additional information and things like that, but
But
And
we're
more.
anew,
it's new,
Okay.
it's, yep,
thank you.
Now,
approaching.
one clarification, the last sentence in the notes to us, the applicant is presenting the proposal as a concept and will return to the commission for a public workshop and hearing at a later date. Will there be another workshop after this workshop?
if need be, I mean,
Okay,
yeah.
or it could be a hearing.
It
Yeah.
could be a hearing, correct. I mean, this was on as a concept in part because when we had discussed putting it on the July 11th meeting, we didn't have all the application material or even the certificate of appropriateness application material, so we couldn't necessarily just based on like the planning department's process of receiving applications, we couldn't put it on as like a full workshop, and because it is just starting the seeker process, we were doing it as a concept review. So if it does need to come back again for a workshop, it can still come back, or we can push it forward. once the seeker is done as a hearing item, so it'll depend on if revisions need to be made and what those revisions are, so.
And where is the project in, under the review of other?
So it was on the agenda last week, I believe, at the planning board for the seeker declaration, for planning board to declare themselves as an agency. Now, there's a 30-day process where all the documents are circulated to all of the involved and interested agencies, because this is receiving funding from homes and community renewal. It's receiving public funds as part of this for low-income and affordable housing units. And then it'll be 30 days process for everybody to respond and consent to the planning board acting or not acting as lead agency. And then it will then have to go to the planning board as well as through our process, but it will need to go to the planning board for development plan review, for new construction. And then, so we're doing that kind of at the same time.
In the state 1409?
That, I mean, it's circulated to the state as part of the seeker review. I'm not sure where that falls, if they do that as part of the seeker review, but we don't notify them for that, like, we don't have a process of notifying them for 1409. That may be.
It wouldn't be us, it would be the applicant, no? Through, or
Right.
HCR would contact,
So.
okay, so we don't know.
We don't know.
Okay, thank you.
And that with all that clarification in mind,
Yes.
shall we ask the applicant to,
Sure.
You're in this, pretty much done everything, thank you.
we're just trying to get our ducks in a row here.
No, thank you, I appreciate it. So my name is Eduardo Navarro, and I'm with Pastoral Associates, architects and engineers based out of Rochester, New York. We have been working on this project now for a while. We met last fall, and we had been working on it before that for a bit, just trying to get everything together. As you can see, there's 62 parcels. Not every single parcel is a building. There is one parcel that is allocated as a park. And this project has been broken down into 21 DPRs. We had 22, but there were some sites that were just too narrow, existing sites that were just not workable between existing buildings. So what we've done is we've tried to accommodate these buildings within the context of the existing fabric of the neighborhood. A lot of the areas around these buildings are vacant or have buildings that are dilapidated or sort of with the X's on them, so that have been tagged, red tagged. And obviously there are existing homes and residences in the area as well. The project has mostly what we're calling townhouse style buildings, row house style buildings. The code does allow us to have multiple units stacked, and the maximum we can do is 3. What we've done is we've created these blocks where we have multiple lots next to each other. And I think the most we have is 6 or 5, I forget which I think it's 5 in a row. We might have 6 on 3rd Avenue. But we have these buildings that are 2 and 3 stories. We have a couple that are standalone that are in areas where we were able to do that. And we've tried to keep those as 2-story buildings. Initially, we did have basements designed, but due to site restrictions, existing site conditions, existing foundations that are adjacent, we just can't dig, and be able to financially make it work. And also, in some cases, you have a basement that, goes down, let's say 8 feet, and then you have to dig below that for the foundations. You're digging pretty deep. And a lot of these buildings did have basements at some point, but they were, there's some existing, they're kind of in the front, not in the back, but we, just given the constraints with cost, we've decided to go slab on grade on all of the buildings. So that, helps in many ways, but it also creates situations where the first floor is elevated because we are not able to go into those basements. The issue with the basements would be you would only be able to get the front portion to be functional. And then just with HCR, the requirements that they have for windows, the requirements that we have for light, we wouldn't be able to get units in those locations, and then you're bearing half the building. So what we've done is we've tried to standardize as much as possible the multiple different building types, building sites, and obviously they're unique. Even if they're same buildings, they're unique because one slopes steep in one direction and across the street it slopes, the other direction. So we've been working on just getting these to fit, to meet the unit count mix that the developer needs. We do have 4 what we're calling multi-unit buildings, which are standalone larger buildings that have 5 units, no elevator, and on the ground floor we do have an accessible unit for each of these buildings, and they're all 3-bedroom units. This is really the only location where we were able to get sort of a cluster of 3 bedrooms, because otherwise it just becomes a little harder in some of the real narrow sites to get 3 bedrooms that are a little bit more spacious. We do encounter some issues when we're going along 2nd Avenue because all the buildings there are attached, but the code does require us to have some separation. I think it's like 8 feet combined between the 2 sides. So it really does narrow the buildings there a bit. So we can go through those as we go through the DPRs. Or are we doing COAs or DPRs?
We're doing them as C of As, but we did, because of the amount of information, a lot of things are just on one.
Right. So what I did, and we do have plans and elevations that are specific to each building block, but then we've generalized some wall sections, stoop conditions, materials, windows, and we can go through those sort of specifically with the elevations. So we could start, however, I think COA 1. Oh, this is actually what we did here was we created sort of a context elevations. In this particular site, I did elevate the buildings across the street because it's one of our biggest blocks that has existing buildings adjacent to it. So one of the things that we've done is wherever we have a 3-block building that has an adjacent building, in most cases we have at the ends of the buildings we have smaller buildings to be able to get 2 stories where we can get them flat. In this specific location, the building, so let's start in the corner with the gable building there, with the gable brick building. Adjacent to that, next at 153, I believe, or is it 155?
153.
Yeah, 153 is actually part of a different zone, a different district, different zoning district. So we were not able to put 2 buildings together there, and also the lot is pretty narrow.
Is that the white space?
Yeah.
So you just didn't show that building? But
No,
there
there's
is a
no building there. There's no building there.
Okay.
It's an empty lot. It's an empty lot that was
Okay.
really difficult to.
Got it.
So what we're gonna do is it's gonna be a park. It's gonna be like a green space for the residents. And then we have a 2-story building next to that, and then 2 existing buildings that are, one is brick and one is like clapboard, so, probably wood. And then we start sort of our bigger blocks. And one of the things that we've wanted to do is push the design a little bit, where in some instances we have sort of traditional siding, and then in other instances we have some vertical board and batten, and then some panels, and trying to, with color, begin to kind of mix it up. The windows are Fibrex windows with different colors, not white, but mostly dark bronze or black. treatment of the materials there is mainly all fiber cement. The stoops are cast in place concrete with black aluminum rails. And the cornices are fiber cement, and we've kept them pretty, each building has a cornice, and there is one sheet that has a detail that we can go through, but as you get to the end of the building, the reason why we have stoops and steps there is because the distance between the front of the building and the backyard is about 10 or 12 feet. So it's actually quite difficult to put something there. And what we've done is we've tried to lower these buildings as much as possible, even having to create in the back locations where the foundation wall extends above the ground, the finished floor, so that we could get some dirt elevated there in those areas.
But that seems to make sense when you look at the houses that are across the street, those are also elevated.
Yeah, and a lot of them do have basements, but
I understand, but
yeah, right.
they appear out there.
So the orange building next door, the last one on the end, the first floor is about 6 to 8 feet. There's steps, there's these, that building somehow, I don't know if it got a variance, but it's pushed back. So the stoop is able to come forward because it's probably it seems like it's 4 or 5 feet back. So they have like a sort of a yard. And we were looking into that initially for many reasons to try to push the buildings back. But because a lot of the existing buildings are at 0, we have to keep them at 0, which forces us then to have stoops that are on the side.
This building is also the start of a row of new construction
Yeah.
structures, so they're
That's
probably in
like
the 90s or
80s
80s, yeah,
90s, yeah.
Okay.
1990s and 1980s.
Now, I understand that with this new construction, we're not going to have an occupiable basement, just a space.
There's no basement.
No, I understand that, and if you did it with a different cost, and also you'd have to have ventilation,
Right.
natural windows and so on. On the other hand, where you have a stoop jutting out, there's space underneath the stoop. Could it be used for trash cans and things like that?
We'll look into that and see the type of construction, because right now what we're doing is cast in place concrete, so I don't know if we're gonna infill that or if we'll see, we can, and in some cases, it might work because it gives you about 4 or 5 feet, so maybe you can put a tote in there.
Well, people with bicycles and trash cans and things like that.
Okay.
Instead of a solid concrete wall taking up a huge section of the front of the house, it would be nice if there were some kind of an opening that would be secure, that people could store vehicles like bicycles and tricycles and
Probably,
and
like you
even,
said, trash might be, because that's one of the.
trash and also carriages with little kids.
We'll
You
look
know,
into those.
instead of a huge cement block greeting you when you look square on the house.
In general, how will the garbage cans be handled?
Well, initially, we wanted to push the buildings back to be able to create these little areas in front to put the trash there, and I think it's.
But you had too many that went to 0.
Yeah, so then when we're at 0, then, it's like, could we maybe in between the stairs create maybe like a fence there, and then people can put in, like in this situation there, you have a couple instances where that works, where you maybe can put a fence in and then put some trash behind it there, but one of the things is there are alleyways on the edges where the new construction ends and the existing buildings are. So we have the 3'5" space there, and it's a challenge. We're still trying to figure that one out.
Does community renewal have specific, I would assume,
They
we'll go through all this effort and then we have garbage cans living on the street.
Right.
So isn't there some priority that's given to that on their projects?
Well, typically in a lot of the projects, we would create trash rooms that have direct access to the exterior. Here, that's very complex, just given the conditions of the site, the lot line requirement. And, pushing the building back a couple feet would then give us an opportunity to create some other issues with the backyards, but I think, that's one of the reasons we initially wanted to push the buildings back, and then we were told it has to be at 0.
So just a general comment on that part, this part of the conversation. There seems to be in my mind, I speak for others, of course, a disconnect between this sort of large, important effort with very careful consideration given to, you just touched on some of them. I know it's a tough project, and having garbage cans on the street. It doesn't support the type of community that we're trying to build here with all of the efforts from different agencies and entities to create a community block by block. To me, there's a disconnect there.
On another subject, I heard the word board and batten and vertical. And somehow, I'm not sure how that's gonna look in that type of neighborhood that we're showing there. What would that look like, board and batten? And vertical boards?
Well, the battens are the verticals, and then,
Okay, just,
yeah, we're not,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the whole thing.
no, it's not like T11 or anything like that.
That's
It's
exactly
not
what I
that,
was,
it's not
that's
that
exactly
smooth
what I
panel
was
with the
thinking
battens that go
Okay.
vertically.
of. All right.
Following up on that, can you, trying to prioritize things I wanna say. The panels that I see in these kind of two-tone buildings with the letter L, are those fiber cement? What are, you've got all these panels, what,
They are fiber
what's that?
cement, they're
So you're gonna
fiber
have
cement,
like smooth fiber cement
smooth
panels?
fiber cement panels.
And then are those clapboards in the sort of, they look like they have eyes to me, like on the on the dark sections, are they clapboards? Is that where you're putting the vertical siding?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of hard to see with
And
this.
then, yeah,
And I guess following up on the garbage can comment, and what Commissioner McEnany said about using that space that's gonna be under the stoop, that could really, I mean, it would be great to have it be available for things like
It'd be,
carriages
it'd
and
be valuable space.
valuable space, and it could also address the garbage can issue
Right, where they're present, where we have them.
For the units that have them.
for the units that have them.
And maybe a question from, what has the city done, or what does get done in those areas where we have just row and row of houses? If you look at those existing elevations there on the top, you do see those blue totes out in front. And I guess we were trying to find and look for solutions, and what we were proposing initially was not viable, which was understandable, but at the same time it was a little difficult to understand that we couldn't, hey, get this to push back so we can create these areas that are more allocated for trash, but
Do you have anything from other discussions you've had outside of HRC related to this?
I mean, we've seen where there have been, like what I was talking about, dedicated trash rooms, either in basements or like a communal space that, tenants or occupants have the ability to bring their trash to. Under stoop, we've seen a couple within, where there's been space allocated like in the vestibules, so that it's not visible from the street, but it is right outside of a door that is able to be brought out. In the alleys, we've seen it on a number of occasions where there's kind of dedicated areas for trash and recycling within the alleys for strips of like common ownership structures. Or in rear yard areas that have either through an alleyway or some other access point to get from the backyards to the front yards. So it is it is a struggle for
Yeah.
town row house structures and in a lot of our urban neighborhoods like this, even for existing structures with trash storage.
I guess switching off of the trash cans, I speaking for myself, I would like to see, like, you have two buildings on that row of the north elevation of Broad Street. That one all the way on the left, and then that sort of light blue wide one that look like they come closer to blending in with the streetscape. And personally, I kind of like interesting modern design in historic districts. But I find those two-tone designs and the yellow design, I'm trying to think of how to, a little jarring within the context of the historic district. So
You
that's
like
my-
it modern, but you like to blend and not compete,
Exactly,
so somewhere
Yeah.
in between.
yes, to
That's the
complement.
key. Yeah, complement.
Yes, and so, and I think, I'm particularly struck by the two-tone nature, and the stripes and
Yeah,
the color, again, I find it unsettling.
Well, part of you've got a lot of design challenges, it's a tough project. But for example, on the upper collage, not the corner building, but the next to, those three buildings, they're of a whole, right? They kind of fit together. And the whole street feels like it has a flow of character. And I just made that up, so I don't know if that's a good description. But what we see below there, especially in as presented here, just the elevations, I don't understand it. It's a mix. It's a mix of heights and materials. It seems to lack some consistency of approach. And I'm not sure that I don't know relative to, does it all need to be more traditional? Does it need to be less traditional? But I don't kind of understand the approach as the new structures gather as a whole.
And I think just to comment on the height and the stepping, the reason for that is that the buildings are actually the same height, but due to the grades, they change. So in some cases, we could make them, well, anywhere you do a building where if you put it the same height, even if it's a building next to each other, there's many times where we've had to shift the heights. So then you start to then customize every single building, just to make it.
is the plan to have home ownership,
No, it's 100% affordable rentals.
every bit of it?
The Broad Street proposal that you reviewed for 3 or 4 new structures, Dan Sanders had presented it last year.
Yes.
Those are also part of MDG's proposal, and those are the homeownership units within the historic district. They also had other homeownership units on Libel Street as well.
Well, you
But
know,
these are all rentals currently under review.
well, that's a problem with the whole city. We have too many rentals and not enough homeowners. Whatever that healthy percentage is, we passed it a long time ago in the wrong direction. When this is all done, the next thing that goes in the drawing is a whole lot of cars parked, blocking the view everywhere. And I heard you mention a couple of times that because of narrow lots, it's really impractical to put a building in there. Have you given any thought for any of this, like saying, well, it can be green space, you put a tree in it and so on? Is there any possibility that any of this apparent semi-waste space that isn't necessary for a residence that could provide some off-street parking and reduce?
I don't think the zoning district permits that. It doesn't permit any residential or any parking in any of those lots. I think one of the things was, when we were talking to the land bank about this, because that was something that they brought up and said, hey, we know that this is gonna be an issue, there's gonna be a lot of cars for people, sort of comments that people will say. But one of the things that they said was, it's really important for us to house people and not house cars. So even, I don't know what the code, what you would have to do to get that, but it was something that they wanted to kind of stay away from, because then it was, a green space there for that, for some tenants to have some green space. And if you look at it in plan, there's an adjacent multi-unit building that we were trying to connect with some amenity spaces, but it's another thing that will come, which is naturally people will have cars and they will fill in the spaces, but it's one of those things where it's not a requirement, and the zoning district doesn't permit us to have, because otherwise you would get a lot of these, people would just start building surface parking lots.
Which in some cases wouldn't be bad if you took two houses that you're not building and provide parking for a lot of people on the block. For residential parking, it might be a much more attractive place to rent a unit. I mean, you're dealing with 60-some units there, or areas.
Yeah, so there's.
So what if you were dealing with 58 structures instead of 62, for example? Could you allocate, considering the price that they paid for it, for the land, which is pretty much zero, that if you dedicated 4 lots into parking, you could eliminate parking for one whole side of the street?
Yeah, I don't know the unit breakdown financing that they have with the state, but I think it's very, there's a balance between how many units and how many, and the price of the project, but.
The most expensive thing that happens to a developer is that you have empty apartments that nobody wants to rent. And the best thing is when you get them all occupied, and the thing that makes them attractive, if there's a clean, safe place to get their get their car off the street. And since you're starting out with land that was basically a gift from the county of Albany in most cases, you've got free land to start with in square one.
Can we go back to the site plan? Trying to catch up with you and understanding the project.
Good luck, it's
So-
very big, it's gonna take a while.
So there's
It's just-
62 units,
No, 62,
62 building
Building
lots,
lots.
62 lots.
well, there's probably, let's just say 62 lots.
62 lots. And the units will be provided on all of those lots, but some of those are
Two.
larger lots or.
3, I mean, the most
3.
one lot has is, 5 in the multi-unit buildings.
Right,
But the row house style, 2 or 3. Number of stories equals number of units.
and it's all new construction,
It's on construction.
and there's no rehab that's part of the project.
No, not for this project.
Okay, so it's all new construction, and what we're seeing here are, we were just looking at Broad Street.
Do you want me to go to it?
What, we can look at the concept, or it's not concept, the photos that we sent, the site context photos.
Context.
Let me pull that up for you.
So the conversation we're having in terms of the amount of new construction, say on Broad Street, and we're talking about some of the ideas around that, we'll have that same conversation on Tunis,
Yes,
both sides of Tunis, and
Clinton.
Third Avenue, we got a big block, and,
Yeah, Third Avenue has a good block.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, in Clinton, so I'm wondering, since this is a workshop, Mr. Chair, there's a lot to grab onto, and as we see the context photos, each of those become their own subset of review possibly, because there's more existing buildings, there's less existing buildings, there's different types of buildings in each grouping, so. No, I'm just wondering how we can really start to dig in adequately to do our work, our site work.
I like the idea of a site visit that I wasn't at the October meeting, but it seems like that could be very helpful. I mean, I think there are some design considerations relative to the buildings being in the historic district that are pretty serious. But I understand there are financial limitations in terms of number of units and
Do you have any estimate of what the cost will be of per unit going in?
I don't have that information.
so.
Is the developer then going to own the property when they're done with it? It'll move
I
from.
think I don't know exactly what the terms are, but I know that with a lot of HCR projects, there's like a 30-year minimum or something, and sometimes it's for perpetuity, but it's depending on how those.
So is this a lot by lot? These are lot by lots? They're lot by lot.
I think we did one for you that was in the COA, each COA had context photos.
Yes.
What we need is a drone video of just.
Yeah,
What's the story on the buildings, the standing buildings that we have pictures of? Are they?
Last time I was here, probably, I don't know, I forget how long ago it was, they were abandoned. There was one really nice one that's brick
So-
right
so
on the
they're-
road and they're abandoned.
They're about to collapse in.
Some of the older brick ones, not all, but,
Well, one of them, there's a red one there that was just plain attractive. And I was
previously
hoping,
you had seen, I think that might, one that, there's one that,
I was hoping that was intended to be an infill.
Well, they were, initially, there was some discussion to rehab some of these, but it was just, it got scrapped.
Yeah, these streets not that long ago were lined with buildings that were occupied that were quite historic. And
like that.
there's still a few there. A lot of them.
I'll be honest with you, I'm uncomfortable with the whole complex of making 100% of them rental units.
Well, that is outside of the purview of the Historic Resources Commission.
No, I understand that, but I'd like to know how many owner-occupied buildings are in the same area. Maybe it's a minority when these go in there of owner rental or rental units. Does it change the character of the neighborhood? Or does it perpetuate where things are? Like the big red one there is a real,
See, that's a real nice one, that one I believe is about to.
It's vacant.
It's vacant and it's in really bad shape. It's in extremely bad shape.
What sort of bad shape is it in?
It has the.
probably the back
The
walls.
abandoned and then I think floors are.
Is it a red X on the front of it?
It
I
does.
don't think it goes.
Yeah, but
Other
the
cities have
X
done a
are-
great job of
yeah.
rehabbing
It-
existing
okay, so-
buildings, but should we talk about materials or what is that?
Well, I guess one question, I was looking at, the Broad Street, the elevation on both sides of the street. And the preponderance of buildings are two-story buildings. Some of them are raised, but most of them are two-story. And it looks like we're introducing, and it's probably the necessity of the the density of development and the economics of it, that we're introducing a 3-story vocabulary to these streets. I mean, I think the buildings have the scale and rhythm that you look for infill. And we can talk materials and detailing, but you know, I'm seeing the jump between a 2-story building and then a 3-story building right next to it as a pretty substantial jump.
However, the floor to floor height on the 2 stories, like on the bottom on the north elevation, 1, 2, 3, one more in please, Gary, yeah.
Yeah.
So because
Well, they have full basements.
they got full
They got a
basements.
raised,
They might
you
have
know,
9 feet on the,
raised first
right.
floor, and
Right.
their floor to floor is higher, so.
Yeah.
And that, the 3-story married next to the 2-story is fine there.
Yep.
It looks a little strange down here with
yes,
the little brick one and then the 3-story right next to it. The other question I have is where you're changing color in the panels, are you also changing the plane slightly of where those exist? So to add a little depth and interest to the, you know, like the ones with the white stripe, is it
So-
possible that projects out?
So
Yeah.
they did at one point, and then we pushed them back in due to just everything getting really expensive, so.
No, I understand.
And, you know, and one thing, we initially did have a lot more clapboard siding, sort of lap siding, kind of throughout. But I think it was the intention, well, I think I know, well, the intention to really bring in something that looks, that it doesn't just look like it was built in, you know, or put there like in 1990. If you look at the building that's way down to the right, you're like, oh yeah, that's like a 90s building. So it was a little bit of a push to add a little bit of a distinction and not just have you know, we did put in a couple, sprinkle in a couple like those 2 that you've mentioned that have sort of the lap siding on the edges there. And obviously, you know, it is something that materials can be modified. This is not, you know, the end all, but you know, we're definitely here to listen to suggestions and recommendations. Obviously, you know, this is very different than what you're typically gonna see, you know, in terms of size and scale, in terms of projects here, you know, in this neighborhood, so it is a big project, so.
it feels to me that, I'm assuming that, it feels to me that the State Preservation Office has wrestled with many of these issues all over the state relative to affordable housing and community renewal. And so whether it is the size and the scale and the garbage and the materials and the changes, et cetera, I'm assuming that they will have a 1409 review because it's state funding. And because it's part of what they do on a regular basis, it to me, it would seem that if we understood kind of their approach to the project and what they find to be acceptable, that it would be very helpful in our review, because obviously we have different sets of concerns and you've got a whole set of requirements and limitations, and it's a really important project and a tough project. So I think that if we can find out what their 1409 review on this project will be, and or have some more information as to how in general some of the issues that we've started to talk about, and then we'll go further to speak to materials and detailing, that would be helpful.
And what's the process for that, Aaron, do you know, just to probably try to keep the project moving and not wait for like.
I'd have to reach out to the State Historic Preservation Office to find out what they're doing for that. I mean, part of my concern is that they're not really getting into the local restrictions from a land use standpoint. So they're not getting really into probably the trash placements and the local zoning regulations that's coming from our
Understood,
municipal planning. So
understood.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from with that, but I don't necessarily know how helpful that's going to be for our local review process.
I don't know either, it
Yeah.
just feels we've got another entity looking at the
And I
an
know,
approach.
I've had concerns before because we've kind of pushed projects off to say, well, we should see what the State Preservation Office says based on this, or we should see what the State Preservation Office says about the tax credit program. But really, like, the restrictive regulations lay with the planning board, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Historic Resources Commission. So whatever the applicant has to follow, in reality, is going to come from your local municipal review boards. So
I understand all that, I think it's it would be unfortunate if two separate historic preservation related reviews cannot interact in a constructive way, understanding that each has its own limitations
Right.
and regulations that they're working under.
because, I mean, in reality, the state could say, you know, oh, I mean, we ran into this with the first phase of the Clinton Avenue project where the State Preservation Office said, you can go ahead and replace all the historic windows in these
Right.
buildings with new windows. And the HRC went out and said, let's pause here for a minute because that's not what our local regulations say. And that applicant had to follow the local regulations and revise their application that went before the State Historic Preservation Office. So I mean,
Understood.
there are times when we will be in conflict,
Yes,
so.
And I wonder how much input they have when it's new construction. I
Right.
mean, it would really be, is the new construction an adverse impact on the existing? And I would say, in my mind, the only real adverse impact is, and we don't regulate color, but I'm really deeply concerned by the material and the contrast and the color selections that I see on that road. That I feel does negatively affect the streetscape.
Right.
So that I feel like desperately needs to be mitigated and blend more in some way. And you know, we do have public examples of other types of
Yeah.
infill projects.
And then the Historic Resource Overlay Guidelines do talk to the use of contemporary material, but in a manner that is quiet in relation to the historic material and what is used with found throughout or typical throughout the district, so.
Yeah. And I'm reflecting on the new construction that's behind the firehouse on Delaware that we talked so much about with all those different colors and,
Oh, yes.
you know, which this is like maybe a version of that when it was first came to us, but you know, I'm not sure if I'm trying to think of things you could look at in Albany.
That was the school building.
25 Delaware Avenue.
Yeah,
The old fire.
Oh, yes.
Fire,
Yes.
fire alarm building.
Fire alarm.
I look at it with great discomfort.
and it's more muted
Than
to
when we
me
started.
than this and then what they started. So I guess that's what I'm saying is to look at, that's what I'm
And I think, you know, we're definitely able to work, you know, create something that obviously will get the approval of the board, because that's the point here, so. What I'm hearing is, well, one of the things I will say is, I don't know if this is something that can be done relatively quickly, but if the board came together, I don't know if you need to go to the site, kind of look at some buildings and, you know, kind of get your sort of senses together and just see kind of what's out there. And it is a hodgepodge of different things. I mean, there's some buildings that because we did something similar. We walked around, we're like, oh, shingles for exterior siding on this one, you know, which was roof shingles, which was odd, and more like blue tarp on that one. So you don't want to necessarily, you know, emulate too much of it. But obviously, there's something that, you know, you might be able to get. And I think for us, what would be very helpful is, and what I've gotten with other cities, including Buffalo, where we're doing a project currently with HCR in a historic district. And that was sort of an appropriateness table, you know, and it kind of goes down the list.
Say again, appropriation.
Like a appropriateness table, like, you know, what the requirements are, windows, material, you know.
In terms of new construction?
In new construction, yes, and then it says, does it meet, is it appropriate, yes or no? And it's either a yes or a no, and then we were able to work with the city, just with some direct comment and I mean, in a way, it's very helpful for us to be able to check these boxes and say, this is what the board is asking for, as opposed to kind of guessing at what we think you really want, you know? And some stuff is subjective, but I think a sort of something that we can kind of follow.
I would think a challenge, and perhaps this is why we don't have it in Albany, is that I feel that we really try to be responsive to the variety in our community. So we don't have, a one size fits all, this material or that material, and I think we've shown a lot of openness to new materials in historic districts, and you know, what I'm reacting to is the multiple materials on a facade
On the
with
same building.
vastly contrasting colors. That is what I am having the response to as not being complementary to the district. It's not the use of contemporary materials, it's the multiple materials on a very small relative, you know, on not a large building, and the different colors being used.
So like what I'm hearing for you is limit material, or I mean, obviously there's opportunities to mix different materials, but the way that it's being presented is too distinct, and because I'm trying to kind of grasp what your kind of suggestion, and I understand. So, you know, we can do a lot of things, but you know, obviously cost is always an issue, and one of the things that we would like to do is yes, have some variety where buildings don't all just look the same.
So traditionally, a row house would have a single material on its facade, unless, as pointed out, there was some sort of an oriole or bay, which might have some more decorative feature, which you're not incorporating here. So I speaking for myself, not for my fellow commissioners, I think that variety among the houses is generally encouraged, but variety on a single 3-story, 3-bay row house, in this manner, I'm not finding it complementary to the surrounding historic district. And I do think you've done a great job with scale and size and the window proportions, except maybe on that yellow building, look pretty good to me. So I think
It seems to me like the yellow building's giving
But-
couple black eyes. I think it's like
but you know, it's just all proportional, but what I'm saying, I'm trying to give some sort of clear, you know, it's not that every building should have the same material, it's to use the same material on a facade unless you are specifically calling out a decorative feature.
Yeah.
Which to me
Yeah,
is
and I
gonna be
think
expensive.
this may have been a holdover from when you did have projected bays and other elements of design
I could see that,
that
yeah.
would evoke that, and then by flattening the facade and trying to emulate that in a different color, it doesn't quite come off the same way. So I think the progression of design and the challenge that you've had all the way through is, you know, has resulted in somewhat of a multicolor approach on some of these buildings that no longer has the validity that it did when it was another element or
Right,
another
'cause
volume.
when we did project them, we had trim around the edges,
Right.
and
Right.
then, you know,
And
stuff like
that's
that,
a whole different animal, and I think, what,
But that's a good point, and that's something that we can, you know, kind of take back to the lab. And, you know, obviously there are instances where we've tried to keep a little bit more, and obviously those three at the top could be different colors, and in our, which is fine, we just give it a different color, but it's the same material, and one of the things that we did do, and maybe this is an example of this, sort of the one on the top is an example where we try to use, and too bad you can't zoom in, but we went with, this one is board and batten vertical, black fiber cement cornice, and then on the base there below the windows as a windowsill, we created, you know, just sort of some smooth panels as a little, just something a little different, you know.
The orange.
The orange, yeah. You know, so that's, and maybe that's more successful in your eyes than something that goes vertical, you know. Or,
Yeah, the problem with the horizontal element there makes it look like the front door dropped down low. Like it goes into a lower level than the rest.
see, I mean, the material could be the same, but the color could be a little different, just to give it a bit of a, you know, that way it doesn't.
Well, we've done that, and we do it with a panel underneath the door or underneath the window. But the basic negative space goes all the way down to the foundation level. And sometimes you put a panel underneath the door like the French windows used to be, and they freeze the door, so after a while you go only as far as you have to when you put a panel underneath it. But the full horizontal element of it looks like it belongs on a different building.
Well, instead of being a different color, I think having it as a horizontal element is okay, or a panelized horizontal element that breaks, you know, unifies the base of the building and is the transition from the foundation wall to the board and batten that continues up to the cornice. So that horizontal treatment, it doesn't have to be a different color, it could be a similar or very similar color or
Right,
subtle shade
But what you're saying
difference.
is, but the material, it basically it's a water table that
Yeah,
we're putting in
right.
there. Which we could put in the
The
same
water
color.
table is always the top of the foundation. And when you get that color, it's now the bottom of the sill is the water table. I find it disorienting.
With the material or with the color?
Just the horizontal element bothers me. I see that as the top of the foundation. And
I
it
see
makes
what
look like the windows drop down to the foundation level. And then when you switch over to the front
There is
door
a-
is,
There is a bit of a recess there, just because the foundation is the
Yeah.
concrete foundation,
but when you start with that and then you have to chop it off in order to get the front door to drop down lower. I don't know,
So I'm hearing the discussion about the palette, the color palette, and appreciation of that the buildings are, will have their own character in terms of materials and color. I actually think that the orange is kind of like when we saw the two-toned, it's just the 90-degree of the same two-tone issue. I think that what we haven't spoken to, can we go back to the Broad Street for 1 second? Sure. Is these start to be pretty good sized buildings when we have 4 or 5 together. And the question of, we're talking about the question of compatibility. And so the scale, we've talked about the scale, and we've talked about different materials, and we've talked about the color and the palette and kind of minimizing some of the contrast. I just wanna say that, and I'd like to have a short discussion around this, because I think we have, as commissioners, different approaches to this. So, a contemporary approach to the design of some of these buildings is, when done well, is very interesting within a existing context. And it almost feels that the three buildings, the two-tone buildings, almost achieved, they were kind of moving in that direction, and I think we unraveled that a little bit and figured out they were vestiges of something else, and they weren't quite modern, and they weren't quite contemporary of design or character, etc. That we've got punched openings of a certain scale is really because we've got residential units and we've got code requirements for light and ventilation in particular rooms, and they're probably for cost purposes of the minimum size as required.
Just one thing,
Yeah.
the ground floor windows are slightly taller than, you can't really
Great.
see that at this scale,
Okay.
but then
Great.
the upper ones are.
Okay.
Just because the first floor is slightly taller, just to kind of
Yeah.
mimic that.
I can see that, your renderings are really good for showing those details.
So I guess we're at this funny crux between traditional elements, scale, a cornice, punched openings, and what was the character of the buildings that are there? And how far as designers do you move in terms of contemporary statements? And not to give you a runaround by any means, and you know, we're a vocal, thoughtful group here, so I have different opinions, but I just wanted to say that the idea that I don't want us to be too bound to the obvious traditional elements which fit comfortably, but they're not quite of, I don't want you to hold back either,
Yes, we
because we're building these now.
Right, and obviously, if we're in a historic district, and obviously there's changes that you wanna see, which mostly in color and maybe in use of sort of distinctiveness of materials and within sort of the narrow ones. But I think we can keep a lot of these materials within kind of reorganize them a little bit to be more uniform individually and maybe not have bright vestiges of the past have moved away. So now if we're not bumping it out, why change the material there? You know, maybe like, you know, we could do it more with the boards, with the canopies above the doors. The one of the reasons we wanted to keep the cornices, I guess I do see, you know, some of these cornices here where they're like flat cornices and then these brackets, these like, you know, tetra-shaped brackets.
We
like
always
the one
look
we
out the
have
window
there.
right here.
And it's like, well, we wanna give it a sort of contemporary, clean look, and not, cause then you start getting into like, we got 5 different cornice brackets and it's just like this little sort of cake topping at the top to be able to you know, mimic some of the beautiful brick and tin cornices and, you know, plaster cornices that you do see in the building. So I think, I guess one of the things that we would like, or I would like, and you know, the whole project team would like, is just if we could get those comments written, you know, even if it's not necessarily a checklist but something that we have the opportunity to then respond to and say, this is our response to your, you know, concerns and comments. And obviously there's things that are within our control of being able to do things, and then other things that we would love to do that too, but we just, you know, like move the building back type of things, we can't do.
You just draft that up, Erin, and send it right along.
We may have to sit down with Aaron.
Well, I'm
With
just
the
glad,
draft,
I'm just glad that this was mainly this building, this project, because last time I came, I don't think we started until like 8 or 9, 7:30.
There were like 6 or 7
And we
applications
actually
for
drove
you.
back that day, and I was, you know, I was luckily with someone else.
That's a 4-hour drive.
It was like, you know, we're like just going, you know? So this time I'm actually gonna stay in the area, so it's okay. But I think for some of you, this might be the first time you're seeing this all as a whole, so I think it's important for you to just take a look at it. I think bringing up the point that there were bays above the doors that popped out can sort of answer some of those questions of why. And sort of we had bays that did kind of jump out but are no longer there. We can, do what we need to do to be able to bring it to the appropriateness that is necessary and at the same time maintain some of the kind of original concept and idea of sort of contemporary, different. And if you walk around, you'll see that there's quite a bit of hodgepodge, a lot of windows are missing, there's very few original windows. So we've tried, you can't really see it at this scale, but if you zoom in, we've tried some 1/1s, 2/1s, 3/1s, fully simulated windows with the lights, stuff like that, so.
Thing about this neighborhood, if we were talking about Clinton Avenue, you're dealing with rows and things happening at the same time and so on. This neighborhood in Prospectville is so individual that it's rare that you'll find more than two together that match. And there's a lot of independent owners who were building these houses back a century and a half ago. And it does give you maybe more freedom to bring in something that's less traditional or more unusual, because that neighborhood, as you go around it, none of them match each other, not the way they do in other neighborhoods like in Arbor Hill, where there's an attempt to get conformity, and most of them are a group of 3 or 4 or 5 and so on. And if you break through that, you really disrupt the rhythm of it. Here, I think you've got a little more flexibility because this is surrounded by buildings that don't have common history, right there on the left and right. They're built by probably somebody who had nothing to do with the person next to it, or at the same time, it's a lot of individual, most of them were owner occupied and had a relative living there. It's an interesting neighborhood, predominantly German neighborhood, as a matter of fact.
And a lot of the buildings on Tunis and Third Ave were relatively, you've got some more ornate buildings here abroad, but the buildings that are no more on Tunis and Third were much simpler buildings. So speaking to that variety, it really is eclectic, which I don't think we're asking for complete uniformity, we're just saying.
Yeah,
Tone it down.
So question for the commissioners. All of these or most of these have a contemporary awning over the door? All, most?
Yeah, initially we were gonna do it only at the stoops, but it was a way to
Okay,
protect some of the.
okay, so can you zoom? So a contemporary element, nice functionality. It makes a pretty quick statement about that building.
Yeah.
And I just wanna make sure that we're kind of all aware of that. Does anybody have any concerns of it? Because it pretty quickly starts to say, these are buildings of this time and place. So does anyone have any concerns about that?
I really like it, and I noticed it more on the building, on the following slide. But I really like it, and I like it for those reasons you just described.
Okay.
I think it's interesting.
In some respects, it ties them all together.
Mm-hmm.
There's a uniformity about that approach, and it's protecting the entryway.
Okay.
I wish I had one on the front of my house. Walk out
Well,
the
here's
door.
the designer.
Yeah, but it's an arch top door,
Oh, he
so
doesn't do
that's-
arch top ones.
those aren't as easy to find.
People, I've seen those now, and they're just metal with the
Yeah.
canvas to get
Right.
the,
Yeah.
you don't want that, that's right.
You want a nice, ornate
Maybe like the
glass,
Metropolitan or like the metros in France.
in Paris, yeah.
Art Nouveau.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's
Art Nouveau on South Main.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, obviously, this is a big site, we can just kind of run through the whole area, there are so this is the townhouse, is gonna be very similar, the big buildings, obviously, there's distinction in material, if we wanted to kind of push that, that's fiber cement and some two-tone, what do you call it, just fiber cement panels. And that was just to give it a bit of a distinction, and it was more of a commercial building. There was, and then there's a brick, there in this one, because of the slope and where the ground floor is on the Second Street side, as you can see at the top, is higher than the bottom. So what we did was to get an accessible entrance there, we put a brick water table around, and then up above, just where there is foundation there at the big buildings, it's split face CMU, just to give it a little bit more of a hardier look. And obviously, where you see the bigger storefront windows are amenity spaces in there. I believe here at this one specifically, there's gonna be property managers' offices. And then to the left, on the left-hand side of that building is a unit, so that's why the buildings there are there. And then the windows, I know there was comments, initially we had just very small little casement windows, because there's kitchens there, so because of the counters, we've had to raise them up a bit, but we try to keep them as wide and as tall as possible, so that they fit within that storefront or elevation.
These two feel like a different animal than what we were speaking of before, the single lot size, and in a good way, different, different scale.
And this one specifically was because it was directly next to that beautiful brick building, and we just wanted to not, just kind of keep it a little bit simpler, but we can do more of that to kind of tone it down a bit, but at the same time, kind of keep the same design.
I think the rhythm on that building and the materials, the subtle change in color works well there.
It works well, yeah.
Yeah, and thank you. We can keep going, just I'm just trying to make sure that, because there's like 22.
Yeah.
Will we go to the site?
Yeah, you can
Will
go.
we take these down to the site, is that kind of,
We can, I can print them out.
you want to say,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
that would be before we,
Yeah, is there bigger paper than 11x17?
I mean, there's 24 by 36, but you have to get it
Yeah, and we no longer have our platter,
printed. So,
gave our platter away.
one thing, obviously, the other buildings will be very similar to what we're just talking to on Broad Street. So a lot of the comments that you're saying for Broad will be similar to here, so we can go through it. What I'd like to just see is the other multi-unit buildings, since we have 4
Yeah.
of them. And for the most part, they're the same, but there is one on Pearl Street that I want you to be aware of.
And that West Clinton Street elevation, where you've got the horizontal orange line, I think that's a great example of what Commissioner McElhenney was talking about in terms of
For
it
the
sort of
door.
feeling like it's a little off.
Yeah,
So
it
it's all the
applies-
same
it applies,
comments,
yeah.
but I just wanted to,
So here we have along Broad where it's more commercial. I think maybe to I would say defend the orange strip is because this block was one of the original blocks, and it was a way to tie the 3 buildings together. And obviously, maybe there it's a different situation than when they're adjacent to each other and next to other type of buildings. But this is along West Broad where there's, I believe, might be a surface parking lot where it's blank there, but that's because this is a commercial district, and that's where it's permitted. And then down at the bottom, if you zoom in a little bit, this is one where the idea here is that the building is more on that commercial sort of front there. The the storefront and the entrance to that building leads to what's gonna be a commercial space, the only commercial, like a retail. So it could be a deli, you know, whatever it is that I think that's one of the, it being on this commercial street, it could serve the tenants of the upstairs or the, you know, community as a whole, so. And that's all the way up on South Pearl, the only building on South Pearl. And the idea here was to maintain the fiber cement, but have a much more like sort of earthy tone, kind of color at the bottom, and then more of a gray at the top with. And the reason for that band there at the front is, and it wraps around, you can't really see it in this elevation, and the horizontal siding on the left-hand side is further back, so it's a little
How far back? About,
12, 10.
and the same on the right side?
The one on the right side, a little bit is further back, and then the gray part is a lot further back.
Are staying.
I saw in some other elevations pretty wide vertical corners that didn't feel so successful.
Yeah,
And
so
they
those
don't feel that
are,
successful to me here in
yeah,
elevation.
those are the stair shafts.
They weren't wide enough for a shaft, really. Well, I'm just asking to look at the corners and the corners.
I think this is where the
Okay.
stairs kind of go,
Good job.
but it's, and this one's a little, the elevation looks like it's on the same plane, but these are really further back, so it's a little
Okay,
deceiving, but the storefronts there are intended to be fully, you know, get as much glazing as we can for that
I like the running bond joint pattern for the fiber cement panels.
What's
I
up
like
with,
the running bond joint pattern.
oh, you like it or you,
You do.
okay, yeah.
Me too.
And the idea was sort of, since we can't afford stone, just get something that kind of, you know, at
Well,
least
kind of,
gives it a
you know,
little bit of a.
Mimics the idea of a big stone block on a commercial building, on a commercial street, so.
Also, you're not building the building out of stone, so this feels truer to the material than to have that stone veneer that's ultimately gonna fail.
What about 2 feet of clapboard on the left and the right?
that's what we were just
Those
talking
are
about.
setback.
Although it's a set,
And
okay,
so-
okay, it makes sense.
And that is the only commercial
That's the only like
spot that you've got?
retail,
Okay.
retail. These other spaces all have like
They're
fitness,
community
laundry,
functions or something.
amenity spaces, property managers,
Managers, yeah.
yeah, community room, fitness, laundry.
Look at
these pictures. Hold on,
We already looked at 10, didn't we?
So, and some buildings are, and that awning should be shifted to the right, that's been corrected, so it's not, it was. But some buildings are exactly the same but mirrored, but obviously we're trying to make them have some distinctiveness depending on, you know, they're in different corners along Second Ave mostly. So that's the same it's the same facade that you would see on Second Ave on any other building, but with grade, it's different and there should be some steps there. stuff like this. There's one
Oh.
two, I might have already seen it. And some of those elevations that you're seeing there are like between like a building and a lot, they're not along sort of Second and Clinton or Second and Tunis.
And the
Well, I appreciate the diverse approaches to the different streets. And I'll look forward to, with these in hand,
Yeah.
kind of walking some of the areas. And the larger buildings feel like they were a little easier to,
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
more typical of, just being
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
see it on its own type
Yeah.
of thing. These bigger ones,
Yeah.
you work
Yeah.
on one and then you have to try to put them together and then.
Yep.
So this is just to kind of, get cold here,
it's really cool.
yeah, like I was gonna bring my blazer, so I'm jealous, John.
Felt kind of silly walking out of the house with a blazer on.
So Tunis is one street that has the front of the street to the back of the street, if you see the civil site plans, where it's like 12 feet. So this is where we're still working on trying to get those stoops down, but at the same time, here's an opportunity to be able to get a lot of, kind of, otherwise can't do it.
It would,
We have to raise the buildings
yeah.
and have to have the stoops, so.
And all of these are, well, except for the 4 and 36, these are all added as new structures, right? None of the Tuna Street properties were in their initial proposal.
Oh yeah, these are all
They're all
new,
new, yeah.
these are all new. And then, I think I forget if the I think South Pearl, was included, but the Tunis Street elevations, these are like the additional
Yeah.
20 or so.
These were in the first, the 4 Tunas and 36 third.
Oh yeah, they were,
These were the initial proposals.
but it's the east and the west elevations that are new. And I think there was, those are mostly new, so.
Is the South Pearl site between Third and Fourth Ave? The South Pearl, is it between Third and Fourth Ave?
I think so. So it might be, the first page has the site map that shows the Alexander and South Pearl and then block up.
Yeah, oh, I see it down there,
So I think
So
it's further.
Alexander and Third.
Alexander and Third,
So
right,
fourth is down
right,
there,
right,
fourth is
right.
south, Plan South,
Yes,
So-
yes.
and then Alexander.
I think with, particularly with Tunis Street, where you're dealing with the hill. And if you were doing it on Alexander, you'd have the same feeling. And they used to have a very famous neighborhood bar in the middle of the block called the Hills, I think the Hillside. And it was everything was in the hillside.
See,
It was an odd place to put a bar right in the middle of the block, but that was it.
I grew up in the Bay Area and so when I was working in Oakland and San Francisco, you get some crazy sights, so where if you open your door, it'll
But-
there are stairs, so.
And that's why you're so cool. You're California.
But in these cases where you are going to have
In the Bay Area.
a huge foundation that's not going to be turned into anything to occupy people to live, we should try some way to help quality of life by hiding trash cans and hide bicycles and carriages and things like, there's a lot of space there. And you're not turning it into occupancy, it doesn't have the same high cost.
What I
I
think
got a lot of the cement, it'd be nice to have an indentation somewhere where you could get rid of things.
go back with the team and see what the construction,
Cause it's more than one or two, there's
like
several,
here on this, especially on that street.
Tunis
it would-
especially.
It would make the most sense, just because that's where you could get, even if you could, especially the ones where you can get a door that's a little taller than the tote. But we'll take it back and see
Yeah,
what
it
we can
also-
do, and then,
It also breaks up the monotony of it. It's it shouldn't look like
Right.
cement that might have been parshed, but that's about it. It's very institutional, almost industrial, and you should be creative with that much blank space, and if you can indent it, that'd be especially with a door.
So the other way you could do it is come in, have a, this is
If you were
the
lucky.
front
Yeah.
wall of the,
Yes,
of the stoop, and you would come in that way and have a little gate there and go in underneath
be
the
excellent.
platform.
Yeah, and I'll talk to the, our structural engineer, how we were, because I think we, when you're doing cast and plate, we've been talking to you.
Yeah, they'd probably form that up anyhow, and form a void in there, because it's not gonna be a solid chunk of concrete.
Right, side by side.
Comments?
So what kind of schedule, Erin, do you anticipate going forward? When can we plan a site visit?
I can try to plan a site visit between, the next HRC meeting is on August 8th. Now, we will probably have the Clinton Avenue project here for a hearing. So we could stack these together. I guess it depends on our process and what the project's plan is for going before the planning board. I think I can talk to my other staff members tomorrow about what the schedule for that, for this project with the planning board is. Well, let's see, 30 days. I don't know that even the planning board can take action at their next meeting just because of seeker possibly, but I guess it'll depend, but we could have this back in August, either to discuss a site visit or to have a workshop and then have it come back in September for a hearing, depending on where it is within the project schedule and if any revisions are needed, what that looks for your timing, Eduardo, but so, we could schedule something for towards the end of July, maybe even
Something meaning the site visit.
site visit, correct, yeah.
Great.
I can send one of the polls out to everybody, provide
And
me
you were
with your,
gonna send us something with paper that we could look at and study this.
yeah, for the site visit.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
VR goggles, so you can see the buildings.
We could probably do it in like two separate, we'll have to
Two
do it in two
separate
separate
groups,
groups at least, so. Two or three, depending on who wants to go and
Yeah.
what the schedule, so.
Okay.
I'll start out the
If possible, even if you, Erin, just speak to the board and just get some general kind of comments in writing, so then we can respond to that, and in our next presentation, say this is how we address this, or this is why we couldn't address this, or X, Y, Z, just to help us kind of stay focused on
focus on.
what the
Yeah.
what the changes or revisions and sort of considerations should be.
I do have one more technical comment just for consideration, is once we have all these, I was thinking of it on one of the other set of elevations about the railings, and they have kind of like lamb's tongues or something at the, I know 4-inch spacing and height, I know all that, but when you see so many railings here together, it's a bit contrary to what we were just speaking to.
We get a little bit of variety in the
A
pattern.
little variety, more contemporary, I don't know that they need to be so traditional, even though you have to be your 4 inches and very good,
So initially, we were gonna do cable rail, but then
Okay.
not in the budget. But then, maybe some can have horizontal bars and just be bars as well, just not, or whatever, but.
Yeah.
It's just one of these things where, and obviously, you would wanna be able to do a lot of different things, but we wanna be cognizant of economy of scale and then not, being too, we're already having to customize so many buildings due to the specific site conditions.
Mm.
Even these stoops have to be customized, even if they're right next to each other,
That's right.
because one
Yeah.
is steeper than the other. You know, so we're trying to keep some type of uniformity, obviously, we can see what the manufacturer has, that could be something that, well, this could be, you know, type A, type B, so we can change it up, but within the same sort of standard and not a custom condition, but. Yeah, so right now we are showing these as sort of filled in with dirt. Obviously where they're pretty short, I don't know what we could get, you know, we wouldn't be able to get anything, I mean, like a bike or anything in, but we can talk to the engineers and see if we can, you know, and then also, I don't know, Alex, if you're still on the call, you know, putting, he's gone.
Sorry, he's gone, it's just Asher.
Oh,
Asher
yeah,
came on
Asher, okay, great, Asher's on there, you know, something to consider putting stuff underneath, you know, talk to Pike and talk to structural just to see how that changes the construction that we were proposing. If he's available.
Well, thank you. Thank you, whoever's not on the phone for coming to Albany and taking on this project and
Yeah, you know,
for your work on it.
and we'll do, you know, we can, changing materials is part of the game, you know, just kind of making things, or not necessarily changing materials, but modifying colors, it's part of this process. I'm on the zoning board in Rochester, so I kind of know where you're coming from. You know, obviously there's things that you would love to see and do and ask the developer to implement, but there are some limitations that we have, but there's definitely opportunities for us to come to an agreement, you know, where everyone's happy enough to be able to.
So you've been on both sides of the table.
Yeah, I feel sorry for everyone who, one time we were doing one and the woman was praying before she had to come up and it was fine, you know, but she was definitely nervous.
Where's your exterior lighting? Can it go under the canopy?
Well, there's one right there that's shown to the
Yeah.
right of the door,
Yeah.
but we probably could put one just right over the
Whenever you get more light, where it would be appreciated.
functional.
Yeah.
We can, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, please just give us, you know, some your comments and to get this sort of, so we can keep moving. We stalled last time because of the change of scope. But this time we're really
Now
trying
the
to
scope is set, really.
yeah, we wanna
Run
really
with
push
it,
this
yeah.
forward and get the approvals that are required and needed in order to be able to get this, you know, on the ground and to some point.
Oh, that's the schedule, 25? Right.
I think so, I
You do?
mean, I
Yeah,
mean,
start.
we're, you know, in our minds, we're working towards all the entitlements, everything we need to do with HFA. So this is not a 9% project, this is so with the historic, 9% is very competitive.
Right.
Or 4%, which is what this is it's a rolling, like it can, they can apply at different times. And I think there's more, I don't know, it seems 4%, you get less just because of the 4% number. And they're different types of projects as opposed to the 9%, very competitive, that you get probably more in terms of funding, but yeah, so we're moving forward to ideally get this all the required entitlements so that we can submit for permit later this year. The code will be changing in 2025, so we wanna make sure we're trying to get everything in before then, otherwise have to go back and make a lot of changes.
Do we need to adjourn the hearing?
We'll need to adjourn this evening.
This
Yeah.
evening,
Yes.
okay, but cause we don't usually adjourn a workshop, do we?
We usually do, yeah,
Adjourn
yeah.
the assembly of the group, otherwise we just,
Stay
we're
dry.
stuck in meeting forever.
Forever.
It's like dark comedy sitcom.
The never ending.
I went to the state, I don't know if any of you were there in Rochester for the state.
The state
Preservation.
In Rochester, and there was one commentary where the groups, kind of like the Landmark Society, they hold a wine and cheese, and then they showed them partying at an event as they're doing all these, kind of functions, and then they have the preservation board, and they're like, we hold boring meetings, and everyone's in there like looking at papers.
This was thoughtful and interesting and collaborative.
I don't think it was boring, it was not boring, I was sorry. It was just what they said at the
But we don't get wine and cheese.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, we might get better turnout if we did have one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want that for certain.
Violate some city regulation.
Probably.
I can think of some meetings where that might have gone badly too.
Yeah.
Good work, thank you.
Thank you guys, I wanted to make sure I came in person to be able to, really, because over the phone is.
No, yeah, totally.
I will put together comments and any additional that anyone has and send them along to you.
Yeah, and what you can do also just kind of give us a timeline of things so that we know when, like, the earliest is, and then when we think we can actually do it, because like August 8th, if you need things by, late July, it might be a hard push without really knowing
Right,
some of
Yeah,
the comments
can
that you
give
guys
you-
have, 'cause we
yeah.
don't wanna make changes and then say, well, that, I have additional comments because those weren't, I haven't gone to the site yet.
Are there any other matters to come before the commission?
I do not have anything to update the board on. Anyone else have any questions or?
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Intumescent
Thank you,
paint.
Asher.
Intumescent,
Thank
and
you.
you can buy special intumescent paint specifically.
There's
Is it-
fire trade, there's some different products.